Before I begin, I need you to promise me something. If tonight you hear your name and you know absolutely that no one is there, do not answer, not immediately, just wait. Sometimes silence waits to see if you will respond to it. And this story is about a woman who did. Moira lived alone. Her house stood near the waterline, old narrow windows, a hallway that felt just a little too long. It was always slightly colder inside than it should have been. She moved there a year ago. She told everyone she wanted quiet, and quiet is exactly what she got. The first night, she woke at 3:14. No nightmare, no sudden noise. She simply opened her eyes. The house was still. She lay there and listened. Sometimes the sea sighed against the rocks. Sometimes old wood settled in the walls. But that night, there was nothing. The second night, it happened again. 3:14. Now she noticed the pattern. She lay awake, counting seconds in the dark. And then she heard it. Not a sound outside, more like a shift in the air, as if someone had taken a slow breath beside her. Moira, her name, soft, almost incomplete. The sound dissolved into the walls before she could be certain. On the third night, she did not sleep. She waited, and when 3:14 came, the air in the room grew heavier. This time her name was clear. Moira, not loud, not threatening, just certain. And what unsettled her most was this. It did not feel like a stranger calling. It felt like recognition. And then she did what old stories warn against. She whispered, "I'm here." The house grew warmer. Too quickly, as if something had entered, and quietly closed the door behind it. The next morning, the hallway window stood open. She had not opened it. Below the sill, on the wooden floor, there was a faint wet mark, as though someone had stood there barefoot. Outside was gravel. There were no footprints. 2 days later, she met her neighbor. His name was Aiden. He lived across the road, close enough to notice things. He looked at her strangely, not like someone greeting a newcomer, more like someone verifying something. "You've heard it, haven't you?" he asked. She froze. Heard what? His eyes flicked toward her house. Nothing. But something in his face shifted, as if he had said too much. Later, when they crossed paths again, he added, "That house used to belong to my grandmother." He said it slowly. "She used to wake at night, too." A pause. She heard her name. A quiet tension moved through Moira. And what happened? Aiden held her gaze a second too long. She started answering. Silence. After that, she changed. How? He did not reply. He only said, "In that house, you don't answer when you're called." And then he walked away. That night, Moira did not try to sleep. For the first time, she did not feel fear. She felt irritation. Why her? Why now? She began searching the house, the attic, the cellar, the narrow cupboards built into the walls. When she bought the house, it had been nearly empty, but in the pantry, behind a loose panel, she found a narrow wooden box. It was not locked. Inside was a folded piece of cloth, carefully wrapped, and beneath it, a letter. The paper was old, the handwriting uneven. On the envelope, only one word was written. To her. No name. Just her. She unfolded it. The letter read, "If you hear your name, it means you have already answered before. You simply do not remember." There was no signature, only a symbol at the bottom, 3 lines, intersected by a circle. Moira stopped breathing because she had drawn that symbol as a child, again and again, without knowing why. That night, the voice came earlier, 3:13, and for the first time, it did not say her name. It said something else. Return. She sat upright in bed and suddenly understood. The voice was not coming to the house. It was coming to her. She stood and walked toward the mirror, and on the glass, from the inside, were 3 faint words. You began first. Moira did not sleep that night. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the letter in her mind. The symbol, the words. In the morning, she took a photograph of the mark, 3 lines intersected by a circle. She opened her laptop and began searching. First, a basic image search, then academic databases, archives of ancient symbols, occult catalogs, esoteric forums. Nothing. There were similar forms, Celtic solar circles, alchemical diagrams, geometric seals, but not a single exact match. It was as if the symbol did not exist, and that unsettled her more than if it had, because if a mark cannot be found anywhere, it usually means it belongs to something else entirely. Then she remembered. About 2 hours away at the university, there was someone she knew, Professor Declan Byrne. Anthropology, ancient belief systems, symbolism. He once gave a lecture about temporal anomalies in folklore. At the time, it had sounded poetic. Now, it felt different. 2 hours later, she stood outside his office. She had not made an appointment. She simply knocked. He looked surprised to see her, but he let her in. When she placed the photograph of the symbol on his desk, he fell silent. Not out of politeness, not out of confusion, but out of recognition. He leaned closer. Where did you see this? In my house. He lifted his eyes. For a brief second, his expression became serious. This is very old, he said slowly, much older than Celtic symbolism. He paused. It is associated with a period when time was understood very differently. How? She asked. He took a sheet of paper and drew a circle. Before time was perceived as a straight line, there were myths describing it as a closed loop, a temporal circle. He drew 3 lines crossing through it. These intersections were called points of return, moments when different versions of the same person could come close to one another. Moira's fingers tightened. What do you mean by different versions? In the legend, it was said that if a person hears their name in complete silence when no one is there, it means that one of their versions, from the past or the future, is attempting to make contact. The office felt suddenly smaller. Why? She asked quietly. To warn or to prevent? He looked at her carefully, but there was a rule. What rule? You must never answer. Her heartbeat quickened. Why? He held the pause. Because answering is confirmation of identity. He lowered his voice. In the legend, it was said that if you respond, the version that is calling gains the ability to take your place. Moira went still. Take my place? It was described as displacement, as if one temporal version could push aside another. Sometimes a person would simply change. Sometimes they would disappear. Sometimes their loved ones would say they were no longer the same. She swallowed. But it's just a legend, isn't it? Of course, he said. But his tone was too careful. And what if someone has already answered? He looked at her for a long moment. Then there is only one way. What way? You must understand what that version is trying to warn you about. He traced the circle again. If you avoid the event that was meant to happen, or correct it, the loop closes. Closes. The intersection disappears. The contact ends. You remain within your own timeline. Then he added quietly, the most troubling sign is not when a person hears their name. The most troubling sign is when they suddenly stop hearing it. Why? Because that may mean the intersection has already completed. A heaviness settled in Moira's chest. How do I know what needs to be changed? The professor leaned forward slightly. In the old stories, there were always signs. Notes found in unexpected places. Lines in books that seemed meant only for you. Objects that fall. Repeating symbols. Coincidences that feel too precise. He studied her carefully. Have you found anything like that? Moira thought of the letter, the second page, the words, and for the first time, she was not afraid of the voice. She was afraid of the possibility that the warning had already begun. When Moira pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine, she immediately noticed a woman standing near the gate. She stood as if she had been waiting for her. Light coat, dark hair tied neatly back, calm eyes. The woman smiled gently. Are you Moira? I'm sorry for coming without notice. My name is Lisa. I live 2 houses down. She gestured toward the neighboring rooftops. I was away for almost 2 years. I just came back recently and heard there's a new owner here. I wanted to introduce myself. I've lived here for a year, Moira replied. Lisa raised her eyebrows slightly. Then I must have missed quite a bit. There was nothing strange in her voice. It sounded sincere, almost warm. Moira didn't know why she said it. Would you like to come in? A few minutes later, they were sitting in the kitchen. Lisa spoke about her move, about the neighborhood changing, about old residents who had left. This house always felt different, Lisa said, looking around slowly. It has character. She lingered on the word. Did you know the previous owners? Moira asked. I remember Aiden's grandmother. Lisa nodded. Very strong woman, very careful. Careful? In her later years, she hardly let anyone in. People said she was afraid of something. And at that moment, Lisa's eyes drifted toward the table. The printed photograph of the symbol lay there. Lisa froze. Her fingers tightened slightly around her cup. Where did you get that? Her tone had changed, almost imperceptibly. I found it in the house. Lisa stared at the image. Too long. There are stories about this house, she said quietly. Sometimes people hear their name at night. Sometimes it's a warning. A warning about what? Lisa lifted her gaze. About someone taking too much interest in this place. A pause. Aiden? She said his name clearly. He grew up here. He knows more than he says. And he always returns when someone new moves in. Moira felt a chill. Do you think he's dangerous? Lisa did not answer directly. I think you should be careful. She stood up. And if he starts asking questions, it might be better not to answer. The door closed softly behind her. The house was quiet again. A few minutes later, Moira noticed movement outside. Aiden stood near the road. He wasn't hiding. When she stepped out to check the mailbox, he approached first. She came, didn't she? He asked without greeting. Lisa, yes. His expression tightened. You let her inside? Of course. Why are you reacting like that? He looked toward the house. If you hear your name at night, don't open the door. Moira stared at him. How do you know? Aiden hesitated. Because that's how it started before. With your grandmother? He didn't answer. This house doesn't like it when certain people come back looking for something, he said quietly. What are they looking for? He studied her carefully. For something that doesn't belong to them. And then he walked away. That night, Moira didn't sleep. She took out the old journal again. She turned the pages slowly and found a line she hadn't noticed before. She came first. I trusted her. I was wrong. Further down, the danger is not where you think it is. Moira felt her throat tighten. Suddenly the lights went out. The clock stopped. 3:14. The air grew heavier and the voice returned. Moira, She closed her eyes. Don't answer, don't answer. Then 3 slow knocks at the door. Moira, Lisa's voice sounded calm. We need to talk. The clock did not move. 3:14. The whisper inside the room grew closer. You already know. The knocking came again, stronger. You don't believe him, do you? Lisa's voice softened. He's not who he seems. Moira stood frozen, and then she noticed something. In the hallway mirror, her reflection wasn't looking at the door. It was looking toward the window, where, in the darkness, stood a silhouette. Aiden. He wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at the attic. And slowly, from the inside of the glass, words began to form. She has returned. And on that note, my dear friends, the first part of this story comes to an end. In the second part, we will uncover what truly happened in this house many years ago and why the past refuses to let it go. What do you think? Who is the real villain? Lisa? Aiden? Or is it something far more complicated? Write your theories in the comments. I would truly love to read them. If you want the continuation, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss part 2. It will be coming very soon. And now, I wish you a peaceful night. And if tonight you hear your name, just listen. Don't answer. Before I continue, remember one thing. Not every warning comes to save you, and not every person who looks afraid is afraid for you. When we stopped last time, the clock had frozen at 3:14. Lisa was knocking at the door. Aiden was standing outside. And on the mirror, the words appeared. She has returned. Moira did not open the door. She stood completely still, listening. The knocking stopped. Not gradually, not fading away. It simply ended. The house felt watchful. Slowly, the lights came back on. The clock began ticking again. 3:15. The silence felt deliberate, as if something had been testing her. The next morning, there were no signs of anyone being there. No footprints, no notes, no broken objects, except for one thing. The photograph of the symbol was gone. Moira was certain she had left it on the table. She searched the kitchen, the living room, the hallway. Nothing. Until she opened the old journal again. And there, pressed between the pages, was the photograph. She had not put it there. On the back, in faint pencil, were 3 words. Look above the beams. Moira froze. Above the beams. The attic. By midday, she was climbing the narrow staircase. The attic smelled of dust and old wood. Light filtered in through a cracked window. She stepped carefully across the boards. And then she saw it. One of the beams had scratches carved into it. Not random, deliberate. 3 vertical lines, intersected by a circle. The symbol, carved into the wood. Her heart began to race. Someone had not only known about it, someone had marked it. As she reached up to touch the carving, a voice sounded behind her. Don't. Moira turned sharply. Aiden stood in the attic doorway. She hadn't heard him come in. How did you get inside? The back door wasn't locked. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the beam. You found it. You knew it was here? He didn't answer immediately. This symbol isn't decoration, he said quietly. It marks an intersection. An intersection of what? Aiden hesitated. Time. He stepped closer. This house stands on something rare. 3 temporal lines cross here. Moira studied him carefully. You're saying this is some kind of portal? No, he replied. It's not a doorway. It's a fracture. The word lingered in the silence. When someone hears their name here, he continued, it isn't a ghost, and it isn't madness. Then what is it? It's another version of you, from the past or the future. Moira felt a cold wave inside her. A warning? Sometimes. And other times, Aiden looked directly at her. Other times, it's a test. Moira stepped back. Why didn't your grandmother tell anyone? She did, he said. Just not in a way people understood. He glanced again at the beam. She believed the danger wasn't the house. Then what was it? Aiden met her gaze. People who learn how to use it. Moira remembered Lisa. The way her expression shifted when she saw the symbol. You think Lisa knows about this? I think her mother tried to interfere years ago. Interfere how? Aiden's jaw tightened. My grandmother was a very wealthy woman. He paused. She believed some things should never be carried through a fracture. Moira understood what he wasn't fully saying. Money, inheritance, something hidden, something valuable. Are you saying someone tried to rob her? Aiden didn't answer directly. She left before anyone could succeed. And Lisa's mother? She broke into this house once. When? Years ago. What happened? She fell. The word hung in the air. From the attic stairs. Moira felt her chest tighten. An accident? Aiden's silence spoke differently than words could. At that moment, the air in the attic shifted. A faint vibration. Moira felt it in her chest before she heard it. A whisper. Not behind her, not below. From the beam itself. Moira. She froze. Aiden heard it too. He looked at her. It's starting earlier, he said quietly. What is? The convergence. Moira stepped back. Why me? Aiden studied her face. Because you resemble her. Resemble who? My grandmother. The words felt like something unlocking. She always said blood remembers places. Moira's heart pounded. You think I'm connected to her? I think, Aiden said slowly, the house didn't choose you by accident. And at that exact moment, a loud crash echoed from downstairs. Not a knock, not footsteps, something breaking. They both turned toward the staircase, and through the still air of the house came a familiar voice. Soft, calm, almost caring. Moira, you shouldn't trust him. Lisa. Lisa's voice sounded too close. Not from outside, not from the porch, but from inside the hallway. Moira, you shouldn't trust him. Aiden froze. She's inside? He asked quietly. I didn't open the door. They both looked toward the staircase. The house was dark. Only faint light from the street filtered through the windows. And then, footsteps. Slow, calm, as if the owner of the house were simply returning home. Moira started down the stairs first. Aiden followed. No one was there. The hallway was empty. The kitchen silent. The front door closed. The lock untouched. But on the floor near the door lay a small shard of glass. And in the living room, one of the windows stood slightly open. She couldn't have passed me, Aiden whispered. Then how did she get inside? There was no answer. Moira, Lisa's voice suddenly came from behind them. They turned. Lisa stood in the kitchen doorway, as if she had been there all along. Her face was calm, too calm. I didn't want to scare you, she said gently, but he's lying. Aiden stepped forward. You shouldn't be here. And who decided that? Lisa smiled faintly. My grandmother sealed this place, he said firmly. Lisa turned to Moira. You see? He doesn't even deny it. Deny what? Moira asked. Lisa stepped closer. This house doesn't just sit at a crossing of time. It guards something more. What? Lisa shifted her gaze to Aiden. Ask him where his grandmother kept her jewelry. Aiden turned sharply toward Moira. Don't listen to her. So it's true, Lisa said quietly. Aiden's grandmother wasn't just cautious. She was wealthy, very wealthy, and she hid everything here. Moira felt the ground beneath her shift. Is that true? She asked. Aiden didn't answer, and his silence said more than words. My mother knew, Lisa continued. She didn't come here for magic. She came to reclaim what belonged to her. It didn't belong to her, Aiden cut in sharply. You both know, Lisa looked at Moira, that this house hides more than just history. Your mother fell down the stairs, Aiden said. Lisa stiffened for a second. She didn't fall. The silence thickened. She was pushed. Moira looked sharply at Aiden. That's a lie, he replied coldly. Then why are you still here? Lisa stepped closer. Why do you return every time a new woman moves into this house? Aiden held her gaze. To protect it, or to control it. At that moment, the walls seemed to exhale. The lights flickered. Moira felt a dull pressure in her temples, as if the air had thickened, as if time had begun to slow. The clock on the wall ticked, slower. A second stretched longer than it should. It's starting, Aiden whispered. No, Lisa said quietly. He's triggering it. Moira closed her eyes. A whisper rose inside her. Not from the house, from within herself. trust no one. She opened her eyes, and for a brief moment, everything shifted. The living room looked different, older. On the wall hung a portrait of an elderly woman. On the table lay velvet boxes filled with jewelry, and by the window stood a woman, Lisa, but younger, with the same calm gaze. And she whispered, "You're too late." The vision vanished. The room returned to normal. Moira stepped back. "I saw something." Aiden tensed. "What?" "Her, but not like this." Lisa's face paled. "That's impossible." "You know what that means," Aiden said quietly. "No," Lisa snapped. "It means she's already under his influence." "Under whose?" Moira asked. And at the same moment, Lisa and Aiden pointed at each other. Him, her. The house seemed to hold its breath, and the clock stopped again. 3:14. The voice returned, but this time it was different. Deeper, stronger. She has already chosen. The clock froze again. 3:14. But this time, no one was looking at it. Moira was looking at Lisa. "You said you hadn't been here for 2 years," she said quietly. "But you know this house too well." Lisa smiled. There was no warmth in it anymore. "You have no idea where you're living." Aiden tensed. "Lisa." "No," she cut him off. "Let her hear it." Lisa stepped closer to Moira. This house didn't just stand at a crossing of time. It always chose women. Silence. "What kind of women?" Moira asked. Lisa held her gaze. "Women like you." Aiden turned sharply toward Lisa. "That's enough." "You think your grandmother left voluntarily?" Lisa continued. "You really believe that?" Something flickered in Aiden's expression. "What do you mean?" Moira asked softly. Lisa laughed. "Ask the archives." And suddenly, her voice hardened. "You have no idea who lived here before her." "Before who?" Moira asked. "Before all of you." At that moment, the lights flickered. Lisa turned toward the door abruptly. "It's already too late." "Too late for what?" Aiden stepped toward her. She looked at Moira and said quietly, "The next time you hear your name, don't assume it's me." The door slammed. Lisa was gone. The house became unbearably quiet. Aiden turned slowly to Moira. "She knows something." "She knows more than she's saying," Moira replied. The clock ticked again. 3:15. The next morning, they went to the city archives. An old building. Dust. Paper. Silence. Aiden requested the property records. The ownership history went further back than he expected. "Here," he said. "Before my grandmother, another woman lived here." "Alone?" Moira asked. "Yes." The name had been crossed out in several documents, but in one file, it remained visible. Moira felt her heart skip. The surname matched her own maiden name. "That's a coincidence," she whispered. "Or maybe not," Aiden replied quietly. They kept reading. Another file. a complaint from neighbors. The woman residing at this address behaves strangely. Voices are heard at night, though no visitors are seen. The date was 20 years before Moira was born. Another document. A police report. Tenant disappearance. Last seen entering the property. Aiden froze. A tenant? The house was rented? Moira asked. Briefly. There was no body. No confirmed crime. Only disappearance. Moira turned the next page and stopped. An old photograph. A woman standing in front of the house, looking directly at the camera. The image was faded, but the features were disturbingly familiar. That can't be, Aiden whispered. Moira said nothing, because the woman in the photo looked like her. Too much like her. Look at the date, Aiden said quietly. It was 50 years before she was born. That's not me. Of course it isn't. But his voice no longer sounded certain. They requested more files. The archivist brought out a sealed box. These cases are rarely requested, he said. Almost no one asks about this house anymore. Why? Moira asked. He looked at them carefully. Because every time someone starts digging into that address, something happens. Aiden felt a chill. What kind of something? The archivist hesitated. People disappear from records. Silence. What does that mean? Moira asked. Their files are erased, as if they were never there. Moira looked again at the photograph. For a moment, she thought the face seemed clearer, and the eyes looked different. That evening, they returned to the house. The front door was slightly open. Aiden stopped. I locked it. Inside, the house was dark, and on the table lay a new sheet of paper. No envelope, just handwriting. You started looking. Moira felt something tighten in her chest. Below the words was the familiar symbol, but this time the circle was broken, and next to it, a message. Now she knows. Aiden looked at Moira. Who is she? At that moment, something moved upstairs. Not footsteps, not a voice. Something heavy dragging slowly across the attic floor. And then, very softly, someone whispered, Moira. Before I begin, I need to ask you for one thing. If one day you feel like someone is watching you, don't rush to convince yourself it's just your imagination. Sometimes the feeling comes before the understanding. In the last part, there was a voice. There was a symbol. There were legends. But today will be different. Because sometimes the most frightening thing is not what cannot be explained, but what can. Let's continue. After Lisa disappeared, the house felt tense. Not mystical, not cold, too real. Moira stopped talking about time loops. She spread everything across the table. Archive records, ownership documents, old reports, pages from the first owner's diary. "We need to understand who benefits from the legend," she said. "Who gains something if I start being afraid?" Aidan nodded. They began with the ownership history. The house had belonged to Aidan's grandmother for nearly 20 years. And then it was sold suddenly. No listing, no explanation. But there was one strange detail in the paperwork. A month before the sale, the house underwent an unscheduled condition assessment. The requester, unknown, no signature. "I didn't know about this," Aidan said quietly. "Were you living here then?" Moira asked. "Yes, and that month, something changed." "In what way?" Aidan hesitated. Grandma started taking phone calls in private, locking herself in her study. Then she changed the locks. He looked up. And one evening, a woman came. Moira stilled. "Did you see her?" "Only her outline. Calm, confident. They talked for a long time. A pause. Then I heard a scream. Silence. It wasn't a scream of pain," he added. "It sounded like someone realizing they had been deceived." The room felt heavier. "What happened after that?" Moira asked quietly. A few days later, an ambulance came. No commotion, no details. And then Grandma said the house had to be sold. Immediately. Moira glanced at the archive entry. Emergency medical response. No diagnosis listed. No comments. And the date matched the diary entry. "If she finds out, she won't stop." "Do you think that woman knew about something valuable?" Moira asked. Aidan nodded slowly. "Grandma always said the house had history, but she never told the whole story." Moira thought for a moment. "If your grandmother sold the house right after that meeting," then she realized the danger was real, Aidan finished quietly. Silence stretched between them. For the first time, this no longer felt like a legend. It felt like someone trying to hide something very specific. And if Lisa had returned now, then this story wasn't over. "We need to find out who that woman was," Moira said. Aidan nodded. And in that moment, one thing became clear. Someone had tried to get into this house before, and possibly more than once. That night, they didn't leave. Moira stayed in the house. Aidan stayed with her. Documents lay spread across the table. The diary, archive records, and one question that kept growing heavier. Who was that woman? The next morning, Aidan went back to the archives. He wasn't looking for the house's history anymore. He was looking for medical records. In the emergency report, there was only one word: trauma. No details. But there was something else. The emergency call hadn't been made by the homeowner. It was made by a third party. The name was partially redacted, but in the paper copy, the first letter was still visible. L. Aidan felt a cold weight settle inside him. Meanwhile, Moira was reviewing the financial records. The house had been sold below market value, far below. And yet, 3 months after the sale, a large private transfer was deposited into Aidan's grandmother's account. No sender listed. "It looks like compensation," Moira said. "Or a deal," Aiden replied quietly. They lined up the dates. The meeting with the woman, the ambulance call, the house assessment, the sale, the money transfer. The sequence was too clean, too deliberate. Then an email arrived in Moira's inbox. No message, only attachments. Old photographs. In one of them, Aiden's grandmother, standing beside a woman, a clear face. Aiden froze. He didn't just recognize her, he remembered her. "I've seen her before," he said quietly. Moira looked up. "Where?" "In Lisa's house, years ago." A pause. "Lisa once asked me to fix some wiring. I was doing small repair jobs back then." He swallowed. "There was a framed photo in her living room. She said it was her mother." Silence. "Are you sure?" "Completely." He stared at the image. "That's the same woman who came to my grandmother's house." The room felt smaller. "So her mother was here," Moira said softly. "And everything changed after that meeting," Aiden replied. They looked again at the date of the ambulance call and at the diary entry. "If she finds out, she won't stop." "If her mother didn't get what she came for," Moira said slowly, "then Lisa came back to finish it." Aiden nodded. But one question remained. If this was only about money, why create a legend? Why the symbol? Why the voice? And just then, Aiden's phone vibrated. A message. Unknown number. The past was not meant to be found. Aiden lifted his eyes to Moira. "This is more than treasure." Moira answered quietly. "This is someone trying to bury an old mistake. And maybe someone is afraid that the truth is more dangerous than any legend." Moira and Aiden were sitting at the table. Old papers, dates, fragments of memory. Who was my grandmother arguing with? Why did she leave so suddenly? What really happened that night? The questions kept growing. And then something interrupted them. A dull crack. Part of the wall near the ventilation grate gave way. Plaster crumbled to the floor. Dust filled the air. And with it, a sharp, metallic smell. Aiden froze. "Do you feel that?" Moira didn't answer. The room tilted slightly. Her vision blurred the edges. Not fear, a physical reaction. They stepped outside almost at the same time. Cold air cleared their heads within minutes. And that's when they understood. This wasn't a legend. That night, Moira didn't go back inside. She stayed at Aiden's place. The next morning, they called professionals. Not mystics, not paranormal investigators. A structural and environmental inspection team. They needed to know, was the house unsafe? And why had they felt that way? The report came back 2 days later. In older layers of plaster, chemical compounds were detected. Substances that, in enclosed spaces over time, can cause disorientation, perceptual distortion, a sensation of repetition, auditory misinterpretation. Not lethal, but strong enough to make someone question reality. Aidan lowered the report slowly. My grandmother said she could hear the house. I thought it was just age. They went through the boxes of his grandmother's old files and found something important. Lisa's mother had done renovation work in the house. But that wasn't all. Archived records showed she had studied chemistry. The pieces began to align. Lisa's mother knew about the grandmother's wealth. Stocks, bonds, jewelry, gold. She couldn't simply steal them. So she chose something slower. Subtle influence. Adding compounds to construction mixtures. Layer by layer. Renovation after renovation. The air changed gradually. Aidan's grandmother began experiencing anxiety, distorted perception, a sense that time was repeating, and that's when she drew the symbol. 3 lines and a circle. But it wasn't mystical. It was a map. 3 lines. First floor, second floor, basement. The circle. A large, round canvas covering part of the basement wall. Behind it, a hidden compartment. When the grandmother realized Lisa's mother wasn't who she pretended to be, she confronted her. The argument was intense. That night, under the influence of the altered air, the grandmother believed she was trapped in a time loop. But it wasn't time. It was exposure. Before leaving the house, she made one final move. In the basement, inside a wall cavity, she used the same cement mixture that had already been altered, sealed the hidden compartment, and covered everything with a large circular canvas. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The following night, Lisa's mother broke into the house. She knew the valuables were still inside. She went to the basement and stayed there too long, breathing the same air. When she came back up the stairs, she lost her balance. Officially, an accident. The case was closed. Lisa grew up knowing only part of the story. She understood chemistry. And when Moira bought the house, Lisa decided to finish what her mother had started. Find the hidden compartment, take the jewelry, and if necessary, recreate the conditions. The symbol, the smell, the messages, the sound at 3:14. But there was one detail. The basement. Aidan remembered. My grandmother always told me to seal it. Never let anyone reopen it. The basement had been closed for years, and that was where everything mattered. When the ventilation was dismantled and part of the masonry removed, Moira and Aidan found it. Behind the circular canvas, the family jewelry, untouched. Lisa disappeared shortly after. Within a week, it became clear she had left the country. Quickly, without explanation. The house was cleared. The basement sealed permanently. The story reconstructed. Moira and Aidan grew closer, and eventually they began living together. But the most unsettling part of this story isn't the house or the symbol. It's how easily greed and knowledge can create a legend, and how long a legend can survive after the people who created it
are gone. The house is quiet now. The walls are clean. The air is clear. The basement is sealed for good. No more symbols. No more voices at 3:14. But sometimes, late at night, Moira still pauses. Not because she hears something, but because she remembers how easily fear can be manufactured. How easily a legend can be built, brick by brick. And how close she came to believing it. Dear friends, write in the comments what you think about this story. Was Lisa truly the villain? Or was she just finishing something that started long before her? If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like. It really helps the channel grow. Your opinion matters to me. And ahead of us are many more detective, gripping, and slightly mysterious stories. See you very soon.